Welcome to the Power of One. Today we're going to be speaking with the victim advocate of Pennsylvania, Susan Estrella. I am super excited to have this conversation with Susan, someone who looks like you and I, who is making a difference in the world. Please pay close attention to her story and see how you can make a positive mark upon the world. Welcome to the Power of One, Susan. Susan, I am so excited to have this conversation with you. I think you are doing dynamic things in Harrisburg, and I was just honored to meet you. Tell me a little bit and tell the viewers a little bit about yourself before getting this position as the office of victim advocate for the state of PA. Give us a little bit of background.
Sure. Well, I am originally from Philadelphia.
Okay.
But spent most of my adult life and career in the state of Florida. Once my husband and I married, we moved to Florida. His parents had retired there, and we were kind of just on the hunt for warmer weather. So I am a member of both the Florida and the Pennsylvania bar. And I started my legal career as a young attorney working for the state, doing a lot of regulatory work. And then kind of just, really wasn't feeling a passion for it. And one day, I tell this story, I was in line at the supermarket behind a woman who was paying for her groceries with food stamps, when we used to have the actual paper thing and not the card that people use now. And they were giving her such a hard way to go. About you can't buy this item, you have to buy this kind. You can't get this bread, you have to get that bread. And I was like, this cannot be true that the federal government is telling people what type of groceries they can buy with their food stamps. So I started doing some research into that and found out that that was true, and just kind of really got hot and bothered by that. And that's when I started, looking for what else could I do with my legal career to make a difference. And I started working with legal services and doing providing services for the poor. And then that led me to domestic violence, sexual assault. When I came back to Pennsylvania, I started working for the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, and then served as their legal director for many years before I came into my current position.
Okay. And it's deep that you say that. Like, that changed your life. Listening to that woman in the grocery store getting hot and bothered. I mean, and
Yes.
That's real.
Yeah.
Susan, there are so many things that are going on in our world, and we have to get hot and bothered to make a change. You
Yes.
can't get hot and bothered and complain and not do something about it.
Right.
It doesn't matter. But you
Yes.
getting hot and bothered and then actually doing something about it, like,
Yeah.
I applaud you for that. And I don't know if you know a little bit about my story, but my mother was the previous executive director for Northwest Victim Services. So I started helping my mom. I was voluntold, for real, that's how it went. So I was voluntold, come on, you come into this fundraising event, you collect the ticket. Mom, I'm like, oh, okay, so we collect the ticket. And I was an educator before this, and then I was in corporate America doing sales and things. But when I sat on the Northwest Victim Services board when my mother retired, I fell in love.
Yeah.
That's when I fell in love with helping others. And then that's when I made my career change. But filing the claims for the victims, that was my passion. And like you said, getting hot and bothered, like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me you didn't get your money back from victims' compensation? Okay, well, let's see what's going on. You didn't, give them these documents. The funeral home didn't do this piece, but I'm going to fight to make sure you get what you need.
Yeah.
So tell me how you became the Office of Victim Advocate for the state of PA.
Well, that was really nothing that I did on my own, other than I was starting to feel that I had kind of peaked at PCAR. I had started a whole sexual violence legal assistance project where we were providing legal services across the Commonwealth, where people survivors of sexual assault couldn't find a free attorney. We were filling that gap. So I was starting to think about, what might be next for me, but then also feeling like I am too old to be looking for a job. So and I am a person of faith. I just started saying to myself, my next job is coming to me. And anytime the thought would come into my mind, I just kept saying, my next job is coming to me. And I was home on COVID, and the previous victim advocate called and said, she was having some issues, wasn't going to be reappointed. And the governor asked her for a recommendation, and she wanted to know, could she recommend me? So it was clear, just out of the blue, it just happened. And it happened so quickly. Kind of stuff, before I knew it, I was on Zoom with the governor. So
that's amazing. That kind of stuff gives me goose for real. And Jen Storm, shout out to Jen Storm. Yes. I love Jen Storm. So here it is. You have someone else who did an amazing time during her time and her journey.
Yes.
But instead of her being bitter and upset for what happened, she probably said to herself, okay, I need someone that I know is boots on the ground and someone who's going to be dynamic in that position. And she reached out to you.
Yeah, I was so honored because, we had done some trainings together. We worked together on some amicus briefs and things like that her office also wanted to be a part of. So we had done some work together, but it wasn't like we were close friends. So to know that she thought of me in that way, it was just super honoring. But I think too, once you find something that you can really put your heart into, you start to see things change for you. If you're just working like to get a paycheck, it's different. You're limiting yourself almost. But when you start to find something that you can actually put your heart into, then you just grow and develop so much more as a person. And then that's what people see and recognize and starts to make a big difference.
That's true, because you never know who's watching, and not watching in like a creepy way.
Yeah.
But you never know who's watching you, and your work speaks for itself. Yeah. And evidently it did here. So that's amazing. How was your family?
Oh, they were so excited. And even now to this day, like I said, a lot of my family is still in Philadelphia. So when I go and see them, they tell people, oh, here comes our sister. She's the governor. And I'm like, well, y'all stop saying that. So for them, they're just over the moon with,
That's excellent. That's great. And that's a part of that love, you know what I mean? And then that makes you feel good. Now, a lot of people do not know what the Office of all of the services, all of the resources that the Office of Advocate has. Please break all of those wonderful things down for us.
Sure. So I like to tell people that we are the state agency with the duty and the authority to advocate for the individual and collective rights of all crime survivors. So it's not just one particular type of crime, but any type of crime. Strategically, where most people interact with us is once an offender of a personal injury or violent crime is sentenced to a state correctional institution, then they have the right to register with our office and receive services. So they can receive information about how that offender is moved in and out of the Department of Corrections when they come up for parole, if it's someone coming up for the Board of Pardons, anything like that. We have about 30 advocates in our office where they are providing services to crime survivors. So if a survivor decides that they have the right to provide comment before the parole board anytime an offender comes up for parole. If they decide they want to exercise that right, then our office works with them to help them prepare for that statement and prepare for that process. So we also have various different programs that we try to put in place to help build resiliency and hope so that survivors can move forward. Because what I found early on, that we were seeing lots of people who were really, really stuck, kind of like at the moment of that really awful thing happened to them. And some of them, it was just heartbreaking. Like some of these situations where they had lost loved ones like over 20 years ago and just still were not really finding the resources to move forward. So we have since hired a social worker where we provide support groups. We are doing a lot more connection with local county programmings so that we can try to connect victims and survivors to resources that are right there available in their county for them. And then we also have a Resilient Voices speaker program, which many survivors find to be empowering and helpful on their journeys to, hope and resiliency. And that's where they just we do a little training, help them to develop their stories and how they want to share and tell their stories. And then we find opportunities where they can do that. Many of them are actually in the state correctional facilities. They offer a class that they call Impact of Crime. And sometimes the speakers will go and speak to inmates just to let them know, how does this really impact families and survivors? And that's kind of like that whole 360 of building restoration and restorative justice options for those who are incarcerated, as well as helping them to see the impact this has on victims and maybe why we want to do things differently so that we can be safer as community members and living together in community. So that's kind of what we do.
Okay. Now, I find sometimes individuals frown upon restorative justice. And for me, and again, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like you said, I think it's that complete 360. If someone commits a crime, they're not only committing it against the person they committed it against, everybody, it's their family, it's the community as a whole. So I do think restorative justice is so important. I had the pleasure of taking that, and I don't know if I'm going to get this correct, the offender, or is it victim offender dialogue training under Jen Storm. And I took that for a week, and it was the best training like I've ever had. So the trainers were dynamic, but here it is, this victim or co-homicide survivor wants to be in front of that offender, and it takes place in the prison system, and they want to know, listen, what was my family member's last words? Or, why did you do this to me? And they get the closure that way. Tell me what your take is on restorative justice. And I do understand, I totally understand some victims, and so some co-homicide survivors do not want to have anything to do with the person who victimized them. I get that. There was a program at Greaterford Prison, which is now Phoenix, and they had a program during National Victims' Rights Week. And it was called Let's Circle Up. It was great. So here I am among these inmates, these male inmates, and all of them to me were dynamic. But in wrapping up my first session, I said to them, all of you are dynamic, but to someone, you're a monster.
Yeah.
So explain to me your take or how you feel on restorative justice.
So, like I said, I think it's an important principle. I've read a lot of Howard Zer's work. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's written some books, not just on victims and on offenders who are in the system, and how that process and what restorative justice means, and how how we can kind of grapple with those terms. I think it's something that we have to come to terms with. And I know this is not the voice for every victim. This is my voice. Right. So I think restorative justice is important for many reasons. One, most people who are incarcerated are getting out. So what services we provide and how we prepare them for coming back to community is important. Number two, I think that we have to find space. And I understand for people who have suffered such hardship that this is a difficult concept or a difficult ask. But I think it's important that we find space to recognize that people do not have to remain the same person they were on what is possibly the worst day of their life. That there is room, as long as someone is living and breathing, that they could grow and they could change. That does not mean that they don't have to be accountable for what they
Right.
did.
Right.
So it is not, I think that's important that people understand we are not suggesting in any way that there not be accountability. When you do something wrong, then you have to be held accountable. But restorative justice is kind of like opening that door to say, you don't have to be the monster. You can grow and be something else. And for many incarcerated people, when we talk about people who got incarcerated when they were 17 and 19, and now 30 years have gone by, they are often just, they're not the same person. And sometimes, even like you mentioned, our victim offender dialogue program, we see many times where the offender does not have a good answer for what they did. Some of them, their answer is, I was high, I was on drugs, I have no idea why I did that. And they don't have, there's nothing like rational or acceptable that is going to make the person who lost that loved one feel any better. They cannot fix it.
That's true.
So does that mean that this person then has no place in our community, no place in our society? I don't think so. I think if mass incarceration was the cure for violence, for safe communities, then we would be in a different place now. But we've been doing that for so long, and it has not yielded the results that you would think from our definitions and from what we say. So we have to find a way to look at things differently and figure out what really is going to be a better solution. I mean, we've got some communities. You think about the number of men that are missing from the community and from family, and what that does then to the next generation. I think that we can find ways to hold people accountable and just to do that differently. And provide tools and resources. We don't want to make way for people to just keep doing the same wrong thing. That's not restorative justice in any way, shape, or form. So it's a difficult balance, but I think that it's possible and something that we have to continue to look towards.
I agree. And most of those men that are missing out of the community, as you know, are our men. It's our young, middle-aged African American men. That's what it is. Yeah. When I went to Greater Prison for the Let's Circle Up program, one of the founders of that program is Felix, and he was 18 when he murdered someone. And in speaking to him and learning his story, I said to him, did it ever dawn on you that you actually took someone's life? And he said, you know what? When I got in there, it didn't. I was 18. When it happened, I was high. I said, I was high. He said, it didn't dawn on me until he was almost 30. And he read a book because he was taking some classes at Temple, even though he was in prison. But he read a book, and he said at that point, when he was almost 30, that's when it hit him. I took somebody's life, and I affected a whole family. Yeah. He reached out to them, but the family did not want to speak to him. Understand that, and you know what I mean? Yes. And we respect that. But it took him until he was almost 30. Yeah. Now, here's something else that, I just been observing, and I'm not saying all people are angry, but I don't know if you see it. A lot of people are angry now. Yeah. And going to the supermarket, you see a whole lot of things where you see parents who curse at their children, and that's their child, and you can raise your child the way you want to. But I was just speaking to my dad about this. Those children sometimes don't even seem like they're affected. Yeah. So when your parent is cursing you out and laying some heavy words, it looks like they become desensitized. Because I wonder, how can a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old shoot somebody and kill them? Yeah. Now that's what we're seeing here in the city of Philadelphia. Like, the city of Philadelphia is just, and again, now I'm not speaking about all teens. We have some wonderful, wonderful teens. But when I get these alerts that come through that there's a 16-year-old shot multiple times throughout the body, and in the head. A 15-year-old shot multiple times throughout the body and the head and killed. How on earth does a teen kill another teen?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Like,
almost like we need to start so much earlier with, and when we think about like the reasons why they're so angry, which some of it I'm like, well, I don't know why we're expecting different, like kids that are being molested and all kinds of things are happening to them. They have every right to be angry.
yeah,
And we have to find ways where intervention is so much earlier
yes,
that we can they're children. They're supposed to be protected. They're supposed to be safe. They're supposed to have rights to education, to be learning and growing. And some of the things that they find themselves thinking about should not have even entered their mind yet.
right.
So how we can find ways to build community differently so that they can really be children. And then again, it's not that in many cases that they have accountability as well. Like but like a choice to have a gun, and that shouldn't even be a child's choice. Like
Exactly.
yeah, there's a reason why children have parents. But the problem I think that we're seeing now is when your mom is a child and their mom was a child, then things that we were taught that we feel are common sense, when those things are never taught, you don't just like automatically know. They don't
Right.
know. And then they don't know that they don't know.
Right.
So
Right.
we get this now, we're probably now into like second and third generation of so many people who are missing pieces that we thought for my age group that, oh, that's common sense. Everybody knows that. And that's just not true.
Your office does a lot with juveniles.
Yeah, we have a victim assistance coordinator that is specifically assigned to juveniles. So she is working in what we call it's kind of like the VOD program, but it's a juvenile restorative justice program where we can do the same type of kind of community intervention where all the people who are harmed can come together, sit at the table and walk through what that kind of correction and accountability can look like. So it's a fairly new program for our office, and she actually sits out of Philadelphia, so it's a new position for her. So she's kind of getting on board with that. But there were a lot of state agencies involved with kind of the development of this type of approach. So we're hoping that we can get a lot of buy-in and people will start to use that with juvenile probation and at different levels, just to really just another tool, not that it's going to be the only tool, just another tool in the community that we're hoping can kind of help with that piece when it comes to juveniles.
Okay. Susan, tell the viewers when they can contact your office for help, and please give them the contact information.
Okay, you can contact us at any time. Any survivor of crime can contact us at any time, and we will do whatever we can to help you navigate the criminal justice system, navigate through the process. Often we find that people contact us when they feel like a crime victim's right has been violated, and there are a number of rights listed in the statute that you have the right to. For instance, you have the right to receive information, and that should be at the time of that the crime occurs. When law enforcement comes out, they're supposed to share information with you to let you know how to contact people in your county and things of that nature. You have the right to receive information throughout the process, to know when an arrest has been made, when there are going to be court hearings, and things of that nature. You have a right to provide your input to the district attorney before any type of plea deal or sentence takes place. So anytime one of those rights are violated, then you can contact our office and fill out a complaint form, and we will advocate on your behalf. Victims now, and this is fairly new, but you now have standing in court. If a right is violated, you can go before the judge and say, nobody told me about this plea deal before you all discussed it, and the judge will have a motion on that, and then you have an opportunity to be heard. So that's fairly new. So far, we've only seen it done once in Adams County. But like I said, whenever someone contacts us about a violation, then we will connect with them. We will work with them and advocate on their behalf to make sure that their rights are upheld. And once a person is sentenced to a state correctional institution, automatically our office will receive the contact information from the DA for the victims. So once we receive that information, we will reach out to you and ask you if you would like to be registered with our office to receive additional information. And then once we get that yes from the person, we will start making those contacts. And then our telephone number is 800-563-6399, 800-563-6399. And at any time you can call Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We have advocates here in the office answering those calls.
Susan, thank you so much. And that right for those victims and co-homicide survivors for plea deals is big. So I'm so glad to hear about that. I thank you so much for joining me today. Keep up the good fight, please, my sister, and do not grow weary. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. What a powerful, powerful conversation. It's all about you and finding your mark upon the world and how you can help those, even if you do not decide to be an advocate for those affected by crime by profession, you still help those within your family, co-workers, and those within your circle. So keep doing what you're doing. Peace and love.